Dr. Elena Santos stared at the pulsing patterns on her quantum display, her dark eyes reflecting the ethereal blue light that filled her cramped office at the Lunar Deep Space Communications Array. For 3 years, she had dedicated herself to decoding what the scientific community had dubbed the marine transmission, a mysterious signal discovered in the depths of Earth's oceans that matched patterns found in deep space. The signal had baffled the finest minds of 17 different spacefaring species. The Arxer, with their crystalline neural networks, had spent centuries trying to crack it. The Viridian Collective, despite their mastery of quantum computing, had declared it mathematically impossible to decode. Even the ancient Skthar, who had been traversing the stars when humans were still discovering fire, had given up after millennia of attempts. But Elena saw something they didn't. Where others saw random noise, she recognized patterns within patterns, a complexity that reminded her of the way ocean currents interacted with marine life on Earth. It wasn't just a code, it was a living language. Running final sequence, she muttered to herself, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. The quantum processors hummed louder, their cooling systems struggling to keep up with the complex calculations. Her latest algorithm was different from anything attempted before. It didn't try to break the code, but rather to swim with it, to follow its natural flow like a dolphin riding the waves. The display suddenly flared, and Elena's heart stopped. Where there had been chaos, now there was clarity. The patterns resolved themselves into distinct shapes, then into symbols, then into something that defied conventional understanding. "My God," she whispered, her hands trembling as she activated the emergency contact protocol. "Admiral Chen, this is Dr. Santos. The Marine Code. It's not just a message. It's a key to understanding something far more fundamental about our universe." Within hours, Elena's small office was crowded with military personnel and scientific experts. Admiral Chen, a stern-faced woman with silver-streaked hair, studied the decoded patterns with intense concentration. "Explain it again, Dr. Santos." In simple terms, Elena took a deep breath. "The code isn't just a language, it's a blueprint. The ancient species that created it understood something about the relationship between consciousness and reality that we're only beginning to grasp. They discovered that the universe itself operates on principles similar to Earth's marine ecosystems. And the threat you mentioned," the Admiral's voice was tense. "The code warns of a species that evolved outside these natural patterns, a cosmic anomaly that threatens the very fabric of space-time. They're called the Void Dancers, and according to this," Elena's voice faltered, "they've already consumed 3 galaxies. They're heading toward ours." The room fell silent. Admiral Chen's expression hardened. "How long do we have?" "Based on the temporal markers in the code, 8 months, maybe less. And why hasn't any other species managed to decode this warning?" Elena's lips curved into a slight smile. "Because they were all looking at it from a purely mathematical perspective. Humanity is the only spacefaring species that evolved alongside a complex marine ecosystem. We understand, on an intuitive level, how to think like the ocean." Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment, her weathered features illuminated by the pulsing patterns of the decoded signal. "Dr. Santos, what you've done here, it changes everything. But it also puts humanity in an impossible position. Every advanced species in the galaxy will want this information." "With all due respect, Admiral," Elena straightened her back, her voice firm. "We don't have time for interstellar politics. The Void Dancers are coming, and we need to prepare." "Agreed. But we need to be smart about this. The wrong move could start a war we can't afford to fight." The Admiral turned to her staff. "As of this moment, Project Marine Code is classified at the highest level. Dr. Santos, you'll be transferred to the Aegis Station. We need you to keep working on this, to understand everything the code can tell us about these Void Dancers and how to stop them." As the military personnel filed out of her office, Elena turned back to the quantum display. The decoded patterns continued their hypnotic dance, revealing secrets that had waited millions of years to be understood. Humanity had broken the Marine Code, but in doing so, they had inherited an ancient responsibility, and perhaps doomed themselves to face an enemy beyond imagination. The real question was, would understanding the code be enough to save them all? Aegis Station hung in geosynchronous orbit above Earth's Pacific Ocean, its crystalline observation domes reflecting the azure planet below. In her new laboratory, Dr. Elena Santos worked tirelessly, surrounded by holographic projections of the decoded Marine Code. Each new layer of understanding revealed more terrifying implications about the approaching Void Dancers. They don't just consume matter, Elena explained to the gathered Joint Species Council, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. They consume probability itself. Every world they touch becomes locked into a single eternal moment, a temporal dead zone where change becomes impossible. The alien representatives shifted uncomfortably. Ambassador Corell of the Arxer Dominion leaned forward, his crystalline form refracting light across the chamber. This information changes the balance of power in the galaxy. The Arxer Dominion demands full access to the decoded transmissions, as does the Viridian Collective, added Counselor Zen, their biomechanical implants pulsing with barely contained energy. This knowledge cannot remain solely in human hands. Admiral Chen, standing beside Elena, raised her hand for silence. The threat we face affects all spacefaring species. We've called this council to share what we've learned, not to negotiate technological advantages. But Elena barely heard the political maneuvering. Her attention was fixed on a new pattern emerging from the decoded data. Her eyes widened as she understood its implications. "Admiral," she whispered urgently, "we need to clear the room. Now." Minutes later, in a secured chamber, Elena brought up a new holographic display. "The code isn't just a warning," she explained, her hands shaking slightly. "It's instructions. The ancient species that created it. They built something. A weapon, or maybe a shield. Something they believed could stop the Void Dancers." Admiral Chen studied the complex patterns. "Where is it?" "That's the problem." Elena manipulated the display, revealing a star chart. "According to these coordinates, it's in the Proxima Centauri system, in Arxer territory." "Impossible," Chen breathed. "The Arxer have controlled that system for millennia. They would have found it." "Not necessarily. The device is quantum-locked. It exists in a state of temporal uncertainty, invisible and intangible, unless you know exactly how to look for it. And now," Elena gestured to the demanding aliens in the next room, "every species in the galaxy will be racing to find it." The Admiral's expression hardened. "How long until the Void Dancers reach Proxima Centauri?" 3 months, maybe less. They'll hit the Arxer systems first. And if they get their hands on this device," Elena's voice was barely a whisper, "then the galaxy doesn't stand a chance." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden alert. Elena's quantum displays flared red as new data poured in. "No," she gasped. "No, no, no." "What is it?" "The temporal distortions. They're accelerating. The Void Dancers, they're not just coming anymore. They're hunting." Something triggered them. Something. Her voice trailed off as realization dawned. Something like a massive quantum computation focused on decoding an ancient signal. "You mean, we did this. By breaking the code, we drew their attention. We've given them a target." Admiral Chen was silent for a long moment, her military training warring with the impossible situation they faced. "Options, Doctor." Elena turned to her quantum display, fingers flying across the interface. "The device in the Proxima Centauri system. If we can reach it first, understand it, maybe we can find a way to stop them. But we'll have to move fast. And," she glanced at the room full of alien diplomats, "we can't trust anyone else with this information. The Arxer will never allow human ships in their territory. It would mean war. Then maybe it's time to stop playing by the rules." Elena's dark eyes met the Admiral's. The code wasn't meant to be decoded by committee. It was meant to be understood by those who could think differently, who could see patterns where others saw chaos. Maybe that's why humanity was able to crack it when no one else could. Admiral Chen studied the young scientist for a long moment. What you're suggesting? It's more than breaking protocol. It's risking interstellar war while we're facing an extinction-level threat. With all due respect, Admiral, Elena straightened her back, channeling a confidence she didn't entirely feel. We're already at war. The rest of the galaxy just doesn't know it yet. As if to emphasize her point, the quantum displays flickered with new data, more temporal dead zones appearing at the edges of charted space. The Void Dancers were accelerating their advance, drawn by the ripples of humanity's discovery. The race was on, not just to reach the ancient device, but to prevent the galaxy from tearing itself apart before the real enemy arrived. And somehow, Elena Santos, the woman who had broken the Marine Code, had to find a way to unite the squabbling species of the galaxy before it was too late. The fate of existence itself hung in the balance, and time was running out. The stolen Corvette sliced through the darkness of space, its experimental quantum drives leaving no trace in normal spacetime. In the cramped bridge, Dr. Elena Santos worked feverishly at the navigation console while Captain Maya Reed, formerly of Earth Defense Force, guided their ship through the dangerous approach to Proxima Centauri. Arxer patrol ships at coordinates 227 Mark 43. Maya announced, her cybernetic eye scanning the sensor readouts. They haven't detected us yet, but we're cutting it close. Elena nodded, too focused on her calculations to respond verbally. After their unauthorized departure from Aegis Station 2 weeks ago, they'd been branded traitors. The fact that Admiral Chen had mysteriously failed to prevent their escape was the only reason they weren't already in custody. The quantum displays surrounding Elena's station pulsed with complex patterns, echoes of the Marine Code that had started this whole adventure. But now she was seeing something new in the ancient message, something that made her blood run cold. "Maya," she called out, her voice tense. "I need you to see this." The captain engaged the autopilot and moved to Elena's station. The holographic display showed a simulation of the Void Dancers' advance, but with a crucial difference from their previous projections. "They're not just following our quantum signature," Elena explained. "They're learning from it. Every time we use the decoded portions of the Marine Code, they adapt. They're using our understanding against us." Maya's organic eye widened. "You mean the ancient species that created the code? They didn't just lose to the Void Dancers. They gave them the tools to evolve. And now we're doing the same thing." Their conversation was interrupted by a proximity alert. 3 Arxer warships had just appeared on an intercept course, their crystalline hulls gleaming in the light of Proxima Centauri. "They've spotted us," Maya growled, jumping back to the pilot's seat. "How close are we to the coordinates?" Elena checked her calculations. "The device should be in the asteroid field ahead, but I need at least 5 minutes to pinpoint its exact location." "We don't have 5 minutes." Maya's hands flew across the controls, engaging emergency maneuvers. "We've got maybe 2 before those warships are in weapons range." The Corvette dove into the asteroid field, weaving between massive rocks as energy beams from the Arxer ships lit up space behind them. Maya's augmented reflexes allowed her to navigate paths that would have been suicide for any normal pilot. Elena kept working, her mind racing faster than her fingers could move across the quantum interface. The decoded patterns were leading them somewhere specific, but the coordinates kept shifting, as if the device itself was trying to avoid detection. Suddenly, her display exploded with new information. "Maya, stop the ship. Right here." The Corvette came to a halt in what appeared to be empty space. The Arxer warships were closing in, their weapons charging for a killing blow. "Elena, whatever you're going to do it fast." Drawing on everything she had learned from the Marine Code, Elena initiated a complex sequence of quantum calculations. Space itself seemed to ripple around their ship, and for a moment, reality flickered. Then they saw it. A massive structure materialized before them, its architecture defying conventional geometry. It was built like a coral reef, with layers upon layers of what appeared to be living metal, all pulsing with an inner light that made Alina's eyes water. "The Nexus," she breathed. "It's not just a weapon. It's a key to understanding the fundamental nature of space-time itself." The Arxur warships had stopped firing, their crews presumably as stunned as Alina and Maya by the appearance of the ancient structure. But Alina's triumph was short-lived as her quantum displays began showing new alerts. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no. What is it?" "The Void Dancers." They felt it. The Nexus activating. It's like a beacon to them. They're changing course, accelerating. They'll be here in days, not months. Maya's face hardened. "Then we better figure out how this thing works fast." She opened a channel to the approaching Arxur ships. "This is Captain Maya Reed. I suggest we put aside our differences. You've seen what we found, and you know what's coming. We can fight each other, or we can work together to save our galaxy." There was a long moment of silence. Alina held her breath, watching the weapon systems of the Arxur ships remain powered up, ready to destroy their small corvette. Finally, a response came. The crystalline voice of the Arxur commander held a note of resignation. "The Dominion acknowledges your discovery, humans. But know this, if your actions doom us all, the last moments of your species will be spent in agony." "Fair enough," Maya replied, a grim smile on her face. "Alina, where do we start?" Looking at the massive structure before them, Alina felt the weight of impossible responsibility settle onto her shoulders. They had found the Nexus, but now came the hard part, learning to use it before the Void Dancers arrived. And somehow she knew that understanding its power would require something more than just breaking another code. It would require breaking the fundamental rules of reality itself. The Nexus thrummed with ancient power as Alina worked alongside Arxur scientists, their crystalline forms casting prismatic shadows across the living metal corridors. After 3 days of non-stop research, they had barely scratched the surface of the structure's complexity. But they didn't have the luxury of time. The Void Dancers were coming. "The patterns are similar to neural pathways," Alina explained, gesturing to the holographic displays that filled the makeshift research center. "But not like any brain we've ever encountered. It's as if the entire structure thinks in quantum possibilities." The lead Arxur scientist, Dal Ren, moved his crystalline form closer to the display. "These pathways, they mirror the flow patterns we observed in your oceans. The species that built this understood something fundamental about the relationship between consciousness and reality." Maya entered the chamber, her cybernetic eye glowing faintly in the dim light. "Whatever revelations you're having, make them quick." Long-range sensors just detected the first temporal dead zones in the outer system. "We have hours, not days." Alina's hands flew across the quantum interface, mind racing. The Marine Code had led them here, but now she sensed there was something more, something they were all missing. The structure's neural patterns kept shifting, responding to their presence in ways that seemed almost playful. She whispered, a sudden realization dawning. "What?" Maya asked. "We've been thinking about this all wrong. The Nexus, the Code, even the Void Dancers, we've been approaching it like a military problem, a weapon to be understood and deployed. But look at these patterns." She brought up a new display, showing the structure's quantum fluctuations. "It's not a weapon at all. It's a language." Dal Ren's crystalline form pulsed with surprise. "Explain." "The ancient species that built this, they weren't trying to fight the Void Dancers. They were trying to communicate with them. The Nexus isn't a key to destroying them. It's a key to understanding them." A deep vibration ran through the structure, as if responding to her words. The neural pathways in the walls began pulsing with new patterns, and Alina's quantum displays exploded with data. "They're not our enemies," she continued, her voice filled with wonder as the truth unfolded before her. "They're not even hostile. They're curious. They consume probability because they're trying to understand it. Every galaxy they've destroyed, they've been conducting experiments, trying to learn how our reality works. They've killed trillions, Maya protested, because they don't understand that freezing time kills us. Their consciousness exists outside our concept of temporal progression. To them, preserving a moment forever is like taking a photograph. They don't realize they're ending lives. The structure's vibrations intensified. Through the viewport, they could see the first signs of the Void Dancer's arrival, reality itself beginning to twist and distort at the edges of the Proxima Centauri system. Even if you're right, Maya said, her tactical mind racing. How does this help us? They're still coming, and they'll still destroy everything in their path. Elena's fingers danced across the quantum interface, inputting new calculations. The Nexus isn't a weapon. It's a translation device. The ancient species built it to try to establish communication, but they ran out of time. They left us the marine code as instructions, hoping someone would understand in time. And you think you can? What? Talk to them. Not me. Elena turned to Dalren. Us. All of us. Human intuition about marine ecosystems helped decode the patterns, but the Arxer crystalline consciousness might be able to resonate with their quantum nature. And the Viridian's biomechanical synthesis could help bridge the gap between organic and quantum states. She looked around at the assembled beings, human, Arxer, and the newly arrived Viridian scientists. Don't you see? This is why the code revealed itself now, why it waited for a time when multiple species could work together. We're not supposed to fight the Void Dancers. We're supposed to help them understand us. And in doing so, understand ourselves. The structure shuddered again, more violently this time. Through the viewport, they could see them now, massive geometric shapes that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the eye could process, approaching with inexorable purpose. We have maybe an hour before they reach us, Maya reported, her cybernetic eye scanning the sensor data. Whatever you're going to try, it needs to happen now. Elena looked at the alien scientists around her, then at the neural patterns flowing through the walls of the ancient structure. Everything that had led to this moment, breaking the code, stealing the Corvette, finding the Nexus, had been preparation for what came next. The Nexus isn't just a translator, she said, her voice steadied despite her racing heart. It's an invitation, and we're about to accept it on behalf of all sentient life in our galaxy. The Void Dancers drew closer, reality warping around their impossible forms. But for the first time since breaking the marine code, Elena felt something she hadn't expected. Hope. The greatest challenge humanity had ever faced wasn't going to be won with weapons or warfare, but with understanding. And perhaps that had been the true message of the marine code all along. The Nexus chamber hummed with energy as Elena Santos made the final adjustments to the quantum interface. Around her, Arxer crystals resonated in harmony with Viridian biomechanical fields, creating a symphony of consciousness that the ancient structure amplified and refined. Captain Maya Reed stood at the primary control station, her cybernetic eye tracking the approach of the Void Dancers. They're entering the inner system, Maya reported. Reality distortions are off the scale. We've got minutes at best. Elena took a deep breath, studying the neural patterns that flowed through the living metal walls. The Nexus was fully activated now, its quantum consciousness expanding to encompass all those within it. She could feel the structure reaching out, preparing for what was to come. All species linked and synchronized, Dalren announced, his crystalline form pulsing with complex harmonics. The quantum resonance field is stable. Through the viewport, they could see them clearly now. The Void Dancers in their true form. They were beautiful in their impossibility, geometric patterns that existed in dimensions beyond human comprehension, each movement leaving traces across multiple timelines. They're not slowing down, Maya warned, her hand hovering over the emergency protocols. They don't need to, Elena replied, her voice calm despite the tension. We're ready for them. The Nexus shuddered as the first Void Dancer made contact. Reality rippled, time itself seeming to stretch and compress. But instead of the expected temporal freeze, something entirely different happened. The neural patterns in the walls exploded with new complexity. Through the quantum interface, Alina felt the first touch of an alien consciousness so vast it defied understanding. The Void Dancers weren't just observing them. They were reaching back. Images flooded through the nexus. Galaxies seen from impossible angles, time flowing like water, consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of conventional spacetime. The Void Dancers were showing them how they perceive reality. Alina's fingers flew across the interface, channeling humanity's response. She sent them oceans and coral reefs, complex ecosystems where countless species lived in delicate balance. She showed them human art and music, Arxur crystal poetry, Viridian biomechanical synthesis, all the ways that life in their galaxy created meaning through change and growth. The temporal distortions are shifting, Maya reported, wonder creeping into her voice. They're adapting. Through the quantum link, Alina felt the moment the Void Dancers understood. Their consciousness resonated with surprise, then curiosity, then something that might have been joy. They had never meant to destroy. They simply hadn't comprehended that their method of observation was fatal to temporal beings. The nexus transformed into a bridge between realities. The Void Dancers learned to observe without freezing time, while the assembled species of the galaxy gained their first glimpse of existence beyond their dimensional limits. Hours passed like moments as understanding flowed both ways. When it was over, the Void Dancers withdrew, not in retreat, but in respect. They left behind a gift, knowledge that would transform their galaxy's understanding of reality itself. 1 month later, Alina stood before the Joint Species Council, her formal presentation coming to an end. The Marine Code was never meant to warn us about an enemy, she concluded. It was meant to prepare us for first contact with a species so different from us that communication seemed impossible. The ancient builders of the Nexus understood that only through the combined perspectives of multiple species could we hope to bridge that gap. Admiral Chen, who had secretly supported their mission all along, stepped forward. Dr. Santos, your actions in breaking protocol led to the most significant breakthrough in galactic history. The question before us now is, what next? Alina smiled, thinking of the quantum patterns that now linked all spacefaring species in their galaxy with the vast consciousness of the Void Dancers. We learn, she said simply. We grow. The Void Dancers have shown us that reality is far stranger and more beautiful than we ever imagined. And they're not the only trans-dimensional species out there. The Marine Code and the Nexus were just the beginning. She turned to the assembled representatives of humanity and alien species alike. We proved that the greatest challenges we face aren't solved through conflict, but through understanding. Every species brought something essential to this discovery: human intuition, Arxur resonance, Viridian synthesis. Apart, we were limited. Together, we can reach beyond the boundaries of our own existence. As the council chambers erupted in discussion about the implications of her words, Alina's hand drifted to the quantum transmitter she now carried, a direct link to both the Nexus and the Void Dancers. Through it, she could feel the pulse of possibility stretching out across space and time. The Marine Code had changed everything, not by giving them a weapon to fight the unknown, but by teaching them how to reach across the boundaries of understanding. Humanity had taken its place among the stars not through force or fear, but through the courage to think differently and the wisdom to learn from those who thought differently still. And somewhere in the quantum spaces between moments, the Void Dancers danced on, no longer a threat, but partners in exploring the infinite mysteries of existence.